Hey everybody, Mike Miller, Herald Times, joined by columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you after Indiana's season-ending loss in the Old Oak and Bucket game to Purdue, a game where it was all on the line, playing for the postseason, playing to get the Old Oak and Bucket back. Didn't happen for Indiana. Instead, it was essentially what we saw for the better part of the season. Offensively, it was the same offense that struggled to finish drives, didn't create enough explosive plays. Defensively, missed tackles, youth, I think, reared its head. At the end of the day, in a game where, again, everything was on the line, Indiana was playing for a chance to extend the season, it was ultimately the things, again, that really doomed them for the better part of the year that resurfaced one final time.
Yeah, more of the same old, same old. And that's probably, in some ways, the most disappointing thing, I think, about this team is while they did grow in some ways, it seemed like they never stopped making the same mistakes that hurt them, like you said. Penalties, turnovers, not finishing drives, just not being able to hit that home run play when it was there or the opportunity was there. And ultimately, that was the difference today was Purdue made more of their chances than Indiana made of theirs because Indiana had plenty of chances. I think they only went 3 and out maybe once today, and all but maybe a couple drives actually got into Purdue territory at some point. They just kept dying on the edge of field goal range, which, Logan Justice has been really good this year. But if there's, if you want to be nitpicky, I guess, the one thing is his range is somewhat limited. Once you get out past, 43 to 45 yards, that's pretty much the limits. And we saw that again today. Missed one long field goal and a couple other times where if you had a guy that you felt a little better about, you might trot them out there for a 47, 48-yard field goal. But so, yeah, more of the same today, more of the same from last season, basically.
Yeah.
And it seems like Indiana football is just sort of treading water at 5 and 7 now.
Yeah, there was. It's hard to really find a lot of ways in which this team developed this year. I think you can definitely point to the backfield. I think finding Stevie Scott and getting. I think the offensive line was actually better this year. There's no doubt about that. I think to provide a platform for a young runner like Stevie Scott is hard. That certainly was a step forward on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, I think you saw that without question the future is in that freshman class. A lot of the young guys, whether they're true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, there's a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. But like you said, it was a lot of things that just went unchecked throughout the year. It was costly penalties. It was missed tackles. I mean, at one point today, you had a flashback of the Maryland game where third down play, Purdue's pinned deep in his territory, and Andre Brown and T.D. Roof, the same two who had a Maryland receiver bounce off them into the end zone. They couldn't bring down a Purdue guy for a tackle, and drives extended. It was some of those same types of plays where you just didn't see enough development. There was no cap on some of the bad things that you saw throughout the year. So I think, yes, there were definitely some areas in which this team grew, but again, some ways in which it did not, and some ways in which it clearly regressed. Offensively, Indiana, in the 2 years under Tom Allen, has been one of the least explosive offenses in the country. It's struggled to finish drives. It struggles to get touchdowns when it gets inside the 40-yard line. Personnel-wise, I'm not sure really what the ceiling is with Peyton Ramsey, quarterback. I thought he was really good the last 2 games, not as much today. We'll see exactly how that quarterback position shapes up when you get into fall camp, once you get Michael Penix healthy and potentially challenging for the starting job. But really, it's when you're Indiana and you're in the Big Ten East, you're not going to win football games with an offense like this. You're not going to win football games with an offense that just cannot consistently stretch a defense, stress a defense, challenge a defense downfield. You got to do something different when you're Indiana, and I think you got to do something moving forward. I just don't think this is working. I don't think this is sustainable, whether it's personnel, whether it's scheme, whether it's any number of things. Indiana goes into this offseason this week, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and I think you might have to even start offensively.
Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be an offseason of change for Indiana, but I don't think, when I say an offseason of change, I don't think we're talking like Tom Allen kind of change.
No.
I don't think there's, I know the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people is get this guy out of here. We're 5 and 7 2 years in a row. Not much has changed. Everything's the same. But I think that you see some of the guys he's been able to bring in recruiting-wise and what he's trying to build there. You see, dangerous word for Indiana, potential for what could be ultimately. And I think for Tom Allen, being a first-time head coach, I think these 2 years have been illuminating for him in terms of what all's involved, the time demands, the responsibilities, all those kind of things that go on a head coach, but you don't really realize until you actually are in that seat and doing it. And then trying to do that and be a full-time defensive coordinator at the same time, I would be surprised if there's not a move to put someone in more of the full-time. And I expect Tom Allen to fully have his hands on the defensive side of the ball, but I think somebody else will handle more of that full-time, and then maybe he just kind of signs off on the plans and those kind of situations to free him up as a head coach. And I think not just on that side of the ball, but the other side of the ball as well. I think he sees some things he likes. He's seen some things he doesn't like. And, part of being a head coach is figuring out what works for your team, what works for your staff, what doesn't work. And that may mean some guys that are good guys that, have had good track records elsewhere, but it just may not be working here. So if that means a change offensive coordinator-wise, if that means a change special teams-wise, whatever kinds of that means, if it means keeping the same guys but implementing, a different offense in some form or fashion, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think you're just going to see a variation on what they're doing, whether you're changed coordinators or whatever. But it's the play calling, the aggressiveness, which we saw more aggressiveness down the stretch of this season. But it's sort of a mixed bag today. It seemed like sometimes when the opportunities were there, they didn't go, and then when they did go, the opportunity wasn't there as much. And we've talked about this before. How much of it is on the play calling? How much of it is on the guys on the field executing the plays? How much of it is the quarterback having the responsibility to be willing to take those shots? Those kind of things. So I think that's all part of the mix for this team. And obviously, what you hope is that you get a healthy Michael Penix back. Gives you some options at quarterback. Obviously, I know they're going to want to recruit another quarterback in as a freshman for next year, a guy that hopefully you can sit down there, redshirt for a year, and have ready to be kind of the next guy in line. And they've got to build some depth that way, and they've got to build some depth at a lot of positions that way. And running back, hopefully, again, getting healthy will help build some depth at running back. But what they've got to find are playmakers, difference makers, like Purdue had Rondell Moore. Clear difference maker today. I mean, he was the best player on the field, no doubt. And with Whop Philyor sidelined basically the last half of this season with injury, I mean, he was kind of the one dynamic playmaker that Indiana had, and he was sat down. And on top of that, you had, your quarterback who's the more aggressive downfield thrower in Penix. First of all, limited in terms of playing time. Secondly, he gets hurt and isn't available down the stretch of the season. So. Yeah. From a lot of standpoints, I think that's the biggest challenge for Indiana this offseason. Got to make some changes, got to find some playmakers in some form or fashion.
You do, and with that, I think you got to get creative. You got to. I think there just needs to be an evaluation of the whole approach, whether that's scheme, whether that's just the approach to using personnel. I think there's been some clamoring for Reese Taylor, and rightfully so, especially when you're watching Rondell Moore do the things he's able to do. I'm not sure they're exactly the same players, but no. I understand why folks would want to see more Reese Taylor. I do think that from the coaching point of view, I think that they are in some ways trying to protect who would ultimately be your backup quarterback, but at the same time, you're in a do-or-die game. It really felt like today, whether it was just on one end you had the lack of execution, the lack of some of those explosive plays like you mentioned. But it also felt like if you came into this, if this was really your best shot at Purdue, that you gave your best shot here, well, I mean, it seemed like there was it seemed like they may have left some stuff in the bag. It just seemed like, is this really all you got in that playbook to win a game like this? I mean, it's do or die, back up against the wall, and this is what you got. It was just another underwhelming performance, both from the coaching staff, I think, both we saw it on the field from the players. As a whole, I think this game kind of summed up Indiana's season in a nutshell. You left some things on the table that, why aren't you using certain things? You didn't really rise to the moment, which we saw all throughout the year. You saw, again, the plays that weren't made, the plays that weren't capable of being made. It just almost felt like a very fitting ending to the year, and everything encapsulated into one, whether it was coaching, players, performance, execution, calls, whatever.
Yeah, it did. And I think Reese Taylor, to go back to that, is a perfect example of what they've got to address this offseason. How do we use a guy like that? How do we put him in the game in a situation that he can help us? I mean, this is a guy who played quarterback in high school, and, we really saw none of that ability exploited at any point this year. There's wildcat formations you can use. There's obviously the situations where you bring him as a wide receiver. Maybe you bring him in motion. Maybe you split out you've seen other teams where they split out the quarterback and bring a guy like that in to take the snap or something like that. You've obviously got double passes and end rounds and halfback options. And I mean, there are tons of things you can run with a guy like that can put some additional stress points on a defense. And it seemed like they never could quite get comfortable, as much as you thought there was possibility for that after even that first game at FIU, with some of the runs, the end rounds, jet sweeps, those kind of things. You thought, well, the possibilities are unlimited here, but it just seemed to never really get on the rails, I guess is where we should say with that. And so, that's just another example of where things have got to change and got to figure out how to optimize this team's potential.
Yeah, I think to wrap things up here shortly, again, I don't think things are hopeless. I think things are certainly frustrating. I can understand from the fan point of view. 5-7, 2 years where you've left so many opportunities on the table, so many opportunities to make plays and win games, and gosh, you see some of the fourth quarter teases this team has put together, including today, even scoring late. It leaves a lot to be desired for the rest of the game. Filling in the pieces in between. I don't know. It's again, I don't think it's hopeless, but I think some things really need to change. I think they need to really evaluate the way they're approaching things as a coaching staff. No doubt about it. I think to win at a place like Indiana, you got to be different. You got to be willing to be aggressive, take chances, and I think we saw that late in the year. But I think it was ultimately one of those too little, too late situations. I just don't think you're going to win football games at a place like this, going against the teams you're going to place every single year, playing the kind of at times too conservative, at times just vanilla. I mean, look at all the checkdowns we saw today. And granted, I think you got to give Purdue's defense a little bit of credit here too. But at the same time, again, I think it just speaks to the overall scheme and approach that you got to be willing to do some things different. You got to be willing to really push the envelope at a place like this to win games, and we just don't see enough of that from this coaching staff.
Well, I think to build on that, basically what we're saying is right now Indiana football, I'm not sure, has an identity.
It doesn't. Never. It has not. I mean, I say never. It has not under Tom Allen.
Right. And so that's what this team's got to find. It's got to find what its identity is. What is it going to excel at? What is it going to make it successful? I mean, Stevie Scott's been outstanding this year, was good again today. And yet in the second half, I think we figured out he did carry the ball 8 times, but it really didn't feel like he was terribly involved in the offense. And it's like we want to run the ball with Stevie Scott, but then we want to go 4 or 5 wide, empty backfield, and then throw the ball down the field. And what is it we want? What is it they're trying to accomplish here? What are we trying to get out of this offense? Do we want to be run first and build off of that, or do we want to just run it just enough to say we run it and then throw it around the ball yard, or what do we want to do? And I think there's a lot of questions Indiana's going to have to ask itself over the next few weeks.
No doubt about it. With that, it is basketball season. No bowl for Indiana this year. A 28-21 Purdue victory here in the old Oaken Bucket game. The bucket goes back to West Lafayette for the second straight year. Indiana talked all week about how much it wanted that bucket back. Ultimately, didn't do enough to bring it back to Bloomington. Didn't do enough to earn it. So they will wait another year, another 12 months to get that one back. So
on the spring practice.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm sure there will be other things to follow for this football team in the coming weeks, months, what have you. So stay tuned. Otherwise, more of the same here today in this 28-21 Indiana loss to end the season. See ya.